The Surf Song by Lane Davis. The darkness in the room made me think anything could happen. I remember the moment very clearly. I was holding my phone with one hand and squeezing Dad's anger management ball with the other. I was wearing just my boxers and lying down on the couch in the living room. That was breaking all of Mom's rules. I remember thinking that it was just too much luck. My parents were out of town and left me, their 16-year-old teenage kid, the keys to their house and car. I'm an only child. That made me the king and only ruler of this vast empire. The minute after they left, I called all my friends, and that night, everyone was coming to celebrate the fact that we were young and that I was home alone for the entire weekend. The darkness swallowed all shapes, but was starting to give, and my eyes could distinguish some figures in the absolute emptiness around me. I reached out to get the remote control that was on the table next to me. My thrust was energetic. It was a movement I had done a million times before. Yet, what my hand touched was definitely not a remote control. It was disgusting, hairy, and seemingly human. I looked to the side and distinguished something that could be a person sitting. Operating on pure survival instinct, I jumped off the couch and got on my feet to frantically sprint to the front door. To my surprise, however, all I saw was the same fancy, expensive living room decoration we'd had forever. There was a huge stereo taking over the center of the place, confronting the huge TV screen. My chest was still aching from shock, but I let my heart rate start to slow down. I looked over at the record collection, remembering how I wasn't allowed to touch it. All I knew was that there were all kinds of records, including some very old ones my dad just happened to find in the house when we moved in 6 years before. I was only 10 years old then, and don't ask me why, but as soon as I stepped in, I felt we're not alone here. My phone vibrated inside my pocket and took my attention back to the upcoming party. It was going to be a blast, just 2 days of unsupervised mayhem and a ton of rules broken. My mom had been in the Navy and almost made it to captain. She was strict, all right, the strictest of them all. But she wasn't there that weekend. They had gone to the beach, so we could do whatever we wanted. The rule book was off, suspended until Monday. I went to shower in my parents' bathroom next to the master bedroom upstairs. Another broken rule. It was a big, spacious bathroom with even better pressure than the one downstairs. I set it to be at its hottest, just the way I like it. I had long hair back then. It was the cool thing to do. I was listening to some one-hit wonder and screaming the lyrics when I reached out for the towel and felt the same sensation. The hairy skin was cold, and it was also very old. I could feel the wrinkles and the hardness with the tips of my fingers. My heart stopped for a moment. My arms and legs were stiffened, and I could barely move. Next, a wave of adrenaline like an electrical discharge filled my entire body. I opened the curtain in a single movement. There was nothing there but a thick layer of water steam filling the entire room. Again, I could see nothing around me, but I knew I had to get out of there pronto. I extended my arms again and touched a silky material, more skin, and some hair. I heard someone breathing heavily. In my desperation, I kicked whatever that thing was and reached for the doorknob to open it up to get to the hallway, naked. I grabbed whatever clothes were around in my room with all the lights on the top floor turned on. But the most frightening surprise was about to come when I went down the stairs. The stereo was blasting with one of the old surf music records found in the house. The lights were off again, but I knew the way to the door, so I ran in that direction with all I had. Adrenaline was still pumping hard, and my body was electrified, in a state of total alert, DEFCON 1. I felt something touching my feet and fell to the floor. The keys flew away from my hands and landed close to the exit. I closed my eyes and kicked back to take the pressure off my ankles. As soon as I could stand up, I managed to open the door to find the dazzling, blinding light of the front porch. The night was pitch black, and some lonely stars emerged shyly here and there in the infinite firmament above me. Light killed darkness again, and all mysteries were gone. I felt safe. I knew I was safe. Yet chills took over my body, making every hair stand. I must have looked pale and frightened, like a kid who had just had a close encounter with death. 15 years later, the cold touch is something that, no matter how hard I've tried, I could never get off my mind. As I'm telling you this now, I can still feel the grip on my ankles. It felt very real then. It feels very real now. I waited for my friends and convinced them to go do something else. Weekend party plans were absolutely canceled. We went in, 5 of us, to get the car keys and grab some groceries. We immediately stormed off, leaving the lights on. We went camping instead, salvaging the weekend. When we made it back on Monday morning, I asked my parents about the previous house owners. They said the house belonged to an old man who was found dead in his robe on the living room couch. But that wasn't the problem. The problem was he had been prosecuted for the attempted murder of his neighbor's teenage kid. He was 16 then and made it out by miracle. As I was hearing the story, I could see in my dad's glasses reflection that I was going increasingly pale. I felt my throat closing while a sudden rush of cold sweat went down my spine. The case had been archived. He never went to prison for it. Raymond Mullflower was his name. I saw all the info in the city's library the following week. We moved 2 weeks after I told my parents about the incident. I haven't been back since. Yet when night comes and my eyes can't see anything, I always remember that one surf song, the thick layer of wrinkly dead skin and the hair of the dark figure. Then I shiver until I fall asleep. Little Jimmy by Raja Sanjeet. I'd been hired by this couple down the same block to babysit their 2-year-old son while they were out for the evening. I was saving money for a summer trip with my friends, and everything I could get was a big help. Plus, their house was just a few houses away from ours, and I could just go and get back on foot. I knew they were a wealthy family, so snacks, a big TV, and some fun were part of my plan too. As soon as I arrived, I noticed both were dressed entirely in black clothes and looked paler than any of us. I mean, their skin was bright white, as if they had never been exposed to the sun before. She was the one doing the talking and was kind enough to show me around and give me a few tips. By the end of the tour, she said something quite disturbing. She said, "Whatever you do here, don't go into the baby's room. Just look that door never opens." I was completely puzzled. I mean, wasn't I there to look after the baby? Nevertheless, I said okay and went to the living room where they had prepared some soda, snacks, and a pillow on the couch for me. I thought I was going to have to hide all of that before they came in because I was supposed to be playing with the kid all the time. I sat on the couch and relaxed as they walked out of the house. Before leaving, I remember her face perfectly saying, "Remember, whatever you do, don't open that door." I turned on the TV, opened a can of soda, and decided to just chill. It was the easiest babysitting job I've had in my entire life. I'm supposed to look after a door rather than a child, I thought to myself with a huge smile on my face. Even the Wi-Fi was super fast, so I was playing online games with my friends on my phone in no time. That was easy money indeed. Ka-ching, easy peasy. Suddenly, I heard a loud thump in the baby's room. Next, I heard a baby cry as if he or she was hurt. I ran to the door and, as soon as I put my hands on the handle, I remembered her words. I wasn't supposed to open the door under any circumstances, not even if there was a creature crying on the other side, probably hurt and scared. I decided to stick to her instructions and keep the door shut. I was going to enjoy being home alone for the night until they made it back. I was still living with my parents, and doing what I was doing in that house was mission impossible in my own home. As I sat down on the couch, I heard another thump, an even louder one in the baby's room. That was not cool. What was going on in there? I tried focusing on the TV again, but another thump made me lose focus. This time, no baby was crying, but I could hear the door of the room opening. I was in trouble. That door shouldn't have opened by itself. What if the baby made it out and got into real trouble, like falling down the stairs or something? My mind was divided. A part of me wanted to get up and go desperately to find the little thing, and another part of me was scared and intimidated. I didn't know what I was going to find if I went looking for the child around the house, yet I got some courage and got up. As soon as I got to the baby's room, the image was like a bizarre horror movie. There was a little crib with tiny handcuffs. The whole thing was painted black instead of the usual white, yellow, or baby blue. Something was definitely not right. I heard some steps behind me, and as I turned around, I couldn't see anything, but something pushed me to the floor, grabbing me by the ankles. I fell while hearing baby laughter that was every bit as macabre as I could have ever imagined. I got on my feet and raced downstairs, falling from the steps on the living room floor. As soon as I could look up, I heard the baby's laughter, and something hit me on the face and dragged me from my feet to the middle of the living room. All the snacks flew out of the TV table, and the couch was a mess. Again, I managed to get up. I didn't care about the money at that point. I just wanted to make it out of there alive. To this day, I haven't felt that level of primal dread, like it was truly a matter of life and death. I could hear my own heart pounding, liters and liters of blood, so I could run as fast as I could and be safe. I jumped on the couch and then made it out of the living room making use of my gymnastics classes. I was in the school's gymnastics team. I knew how to do a thing or two with my body. I was trying to avoid the ground as much as possible, so I jumped from the couch to a table, from there to the kitchen, then I balanced on the curtains and finally made it to the front door. As soon as my hand reached the handle, I felt something hit me from behind and my forehead hit the door. I became dizzy and my vision was blurry for a moment. The door had 2 security locks I was supposed to open from the inside. I opened the first one and suffered another thump from behind. I could hear the baby laughing very clearly. Finally, when I made it out and closed the door behind me, a loud thump made me realize I could have been in grave danger had I stayed longer. I waited for the couple outside the door, thinking about what had just happened. Will they pay me anyway? What was going on with that baby in there? As soon as they arrived and saw me with the bruises and my hair being a mess, they immediately understood what had happened. "I told you not to open that door no matter what," she said so loudly it could have been taken by a scream. I looked at her, scared to death, and said very softly, "It wasn't me. It opened it by itself." Her face changed immediately, and he hugged her from behind. She looked at me with a very different expression and said, "I'm sorry, of course it wasn't you. Little Jimmy can be like that sometimes. He's a good boy though, a very good boy. Let me give you some money for your time today, sugar." She opened her purse and gave me $1,000. She said, "This should be enough to keep this secret between us. What do you think, darling?" They moved right after the summer. I invited my friends to do all kinds of crazy things and bought some very expensive and very good gymnastics equipment with the money I made that night. Plus, that evening, gymnastics saved my life. Therefore, I became the most dedicated, hard-working student in the gymnastics class. Now that I'm about to represent my state in a regional competition, I remember little Jimmy and that night very clearly. I never told this to anyone, but I'll wonder my entire life what little Jimmy was, or if he was even real. The Old Lake House by Harry Martinez. That old house had always been a mystery to me. When I was little, we used to go every summer. Well, that's until Grandpa suddenly decided to sell it for some unknown reason. He just went from loving the place to getting rid of the property at a joke of a price. None of us understood why. Time went by and my company grew to the point where I was able to purchase the property where I had spent my most wonderful moments. I couldn't believe my happiness. I was only 35. Opening that front door to find the same furniture and paint was a little odd, to be honest. I mean, everything was exactly as I remembered it. It was as if the house wasn't inhabited, but kept in perfect condition throughout the past decades. I sat on the couch and the smell of it reminded me of Grandpa and his cologne. Could it be that that smell was still in the air 3 decades later? I left my suitcase in the upstairs bedroom. It was a place with a huge window overlooking the backyard. You could clearly see the lake behind it and the house's boat included in the price floating next to our private pier. The afternoon was perfect, and the soft breeze came in through the window when I opened it up. Spring was forcing my surroundings to blossom, and the temperature was great to sit on the balcony with just a sweater. My wife and my daughter were coming for the weekend, but that wasn't until nighttime tomorrow. I had a full night and day to myself. Well, that's what I thought. The day ended with a crimson-red sunset that was a spectacle. The pink and silver water of the lake reflected the day's end until darkness covered the entire valley like a blanket full of precious stones between the mountains afar. But the night didn't bring only that. I was about to find out. I went downstairs to the kitchen to make myself something to eat. Everything was quiet around me. That's when I started to notice the whisper. There was a whisper, a soft rumor that started getting into my brain. It was the voice of an old woman, tender and nice. But that wasn't the craziest part. I had heard that voice before. I was sure of that. At first, I turned around and looked all over the place to see if I could find anyone. The house was empty. It was only me inside. I put on some music from an old radio that was sitting on the shelves next to the kitchen artifacts. Elvis was singing his heart out, and I started humming to the melody, which made the voice step back. For a little while, everything was calm again. When I sat down to eat my dinner, the voice made it back into my head. Wasn't just one voice this time, there were two of them. A male voice joined, and I suddenly heard two people saying indistinct things to my brain. I remember thinking, have I gone mad? I mean, I work 12 to 15 hours every day and read extensively about how unplugging from such a hectic life could have some side effects. I turned on the TV and watched the sports news. "Shut that thing down, will ya?" I heard the man in my head saying with a slightly louder voice. "Leave the kid alone, he just wants to have fun," the lady answered very clearly and even louder. "We need him to do something else, don't you remember? He needs to do it," the man answered the lady, and the conversation got even louder. "You know what happened last time? We don't want that to happen again now, do we? He needs some time." Suddenly, the voices stopped talking. Everything went silent again. I focused on the sports and tried to forget I heard anything else in my head. Yet a memory from my childhood came to me, very clear and real. I was in my room trying to sneak out to get some chocolate from the fridge. I must have been 8 years old. That time, I heard a voice in my head saying, "Don't be a naughty boy," and I stayed put. That memory had been lost in my mind for decades. That's why the voices were so familiar to me. I heard them before. The family was coming the next day, so I decided to call it a night and went up to the bedroom to rest. The view from the window was magnificent. The moon was shining high up above the lake, leaving a moving trace of its glow all the way from the shore to the mountains. I stood there looking at the marvels of nature and fell asleep with a huge smile on my face. The place was finally mine, and it was every bit as spectacular as I remembered it. A weird noise woke me up at 3 in the morning. There was a loud screeching noise coming from downstairs. I jumped into my pants and raced to the kitchen just to find the TV and the radio on and all the dishes I left in the sink perfectly washed and dried. I panicked. I ran to get my coat, but the male voice said, "Don't run, naughty boy. We've been waiting for you for a long time." Then the female voice said, "Yes, you were gone for a long time. Now that you're back, you're gonna finish what he started." I was baffled. How can you escape something that haunts you from within? The male voice went again, "You know what you have to do. Kill this body, sacrifice it so we can come back to life." The female voice added, "You'll come here to this wonderful place to live forever like us." I ran to the door but hit the small table next to it, and the lamp made a huge noise when it fell to the floor. My car keys were gone. When I looked again, the lamp was again perfectly well and on the little table. I had definitely gone mad. "What are you looking for, naughty boy?" the man said. "There's only one way out of here, you know? The big knife in the kitchen drawer." I had to sit down and remember the breathing and meditation exercises I did at work when I was too stressed. I started working on my respiration and little by little brought myself some calm. As soon as I could silence the voices that were repeating, "Do it, do it, do it," non-stop and in unison, I left the house through the back door and ran to the pier. I jumped on the boat and rowed all the way to the middle of the lake, just far enough to make the voices go silent. I knew I couldn't go back, so I just lay back on the boat and found a little piece of paper wrapped in plastic glued to the wooden board where I was sitting. It was my granddad's handwriting. "If you can read this, sell that house." I was trying to communicate with my ancestors and woke up the evil spirits that were once buried underneath it. "You're in grave danger." I spent the night floating on the lake, thinking about my granddad's words. Everything made sense. The next morning, I went back to the house and found the car keys hanging next to the door. The voices were gone, the TV was off, and so was the radio. I called the family, canceled the weekend, and had a bulldozer bring down the entire building the following week. Among the house's debris, I found my grandpa's old Ouija board. It was intact, looking straight at me as if I should use it again. It was the only thing surviving. I took a deep breath, put together some paper and dry leaves, and burned it down to ashes. We built a different house on top of the old remains, and now the voices are gone. I hope the link to that other evil world is forever destroyed.